Books, check them out. You could read about stars or electric guitars, or you could read about your own demise in the next million years by Charles Galton Darwin. Why are we talking about this text? Well, this is an important text. In our Books in Under 10 Minutes, allow me to professorize and instruct you. Get out your notes, because there will be a multiple choice essay at the end. This book was written in 1952. And Charles Galton Darwin was from the Galton Wedgwood Royal Society establishment elite. He was a knight of the British Empire. He was a physicist, and in the circles of Keynesians, he was a relative of Milton Keynes, John Maynard Keynes. He was a fellow of the Royal Society, as we said, a rabid Darwinist, because he was the grandson of Charles Darwin, hence Charles Galton Darwin. So the book is a discussion of where human beings will mutate in the next million years. Quite literally, he's saying that this is where we're going to go, because it's a plan. It's a directed plan from his perspective. And the book covers population control. It covers the history of societal revolutions, the Industrial Revolution, etc. It covers the emergence of man as an animal, and man as a being to be controlled, to be herded, and man in the pursuit of happiness. And then in the final future age, the Technocratic Era, he talks about how to corral man, control man, and to set up his ideal system. So we'll work through this pretty quickly here. He talks about the laws of physics, the laws of thermodynamics, conservation of energy. All these things have given man power over nature. But one thing that man has to do is to steer evolution. Evolution has to be controlled and steered in a very almost amoral way, because it's necessary to guide that evolution in a way that's advantageous to the superclass, to the elite. He talks about population control being something proven by, of course, Thomas Malthus, and Malthus's idea of controlling human population through the study of flies in a jar was a justification for the British Empire's adoption of this whole notion of population control. Really, this is where it finds its origin in the modern world. So controlling the population, keeping it down, comes out of this ideology. And Galton Darwin says that, yeah, we have to do that because the population can get out of control, like deer population or like animal populations. They can be out of balance. And so he says that we have to steer it towards having a better, quote, race of the future. That's his view. And so this evolution is he said, necessary for the elite to steer so that they can control the future, the great reset technocratic world. He says, where we can create Supermen, basically X-Men type situations, where the elite will be in control and they will be the Nietzschean Übermensch of the future. He talks about planetary collisions and how there is a connection between nature and man, to the degree that man formerly was underneath nature but now can control it. And in this book he talks about how cloud seeding and weather control would be where we would go. In fact, in his day it already existed. So in the 1950s, we know that cloud seeding existed. And he says that this will be in full control in the near future, and man will have dominance over his environment to such a degree that he will be godlike. And by this godlike technology, man will be able to alter hormones to alter human nature itself. In fact, he says we might even pretty soon create designer babies, and a lot of this will happen through stabbies, he says, because man is a manimal. Manimal. It sounds like a Muppet or something. I mean, He says that man is really just a being to be herded and to be experimented on. And there's nothing wrong with that, because ultimately it serves the designs of those who will steer the evolution. And he says that biological determinism proves that the elite will eventually evolve into a separate species. So this notion of the Eloi and the Morlock that we find in the H.G. Wells story of the time machine, that's exactly what he's talking about. Because, you know, H.G. Wells' time machine, you know, he's in the circles of these people. He's in the Royal Society Fabian elite circles. In fact, he says that through X-ray experimentation, through the causing of mutations through various chemicals, man will mutate. We will mutate man both in a genetic way and in an epigenetic way. And the scientific elite priest class will be able to do this. He says that the elite in the future will be able to have, they'll be the only ones that have children, whereas anyone under a certain socioeconomic status will be sterilized. He says that this is ultimately a return to the myth of the hero, the Ubermensch, and he says that there's not really any such thing as a nature or quote human nature. It doesn't exist. Those are just human terms, and really everything is just a random mutation anyway. And since mankind competes for resources, we will keep the elite class as the wild men, and everyone else will be kept down or eventually sterilized and gotten rid of. He says that religion will be controlled. There will be some form of a new fake world religion, and it will really serve the world state. That's it. Religions ultimately, he says, are tools really for this power structure from their view. And this new world religion, he says on page 114, will be about something akin to syncretism or some sort of perennialism, kind of a generic, all the world religions are blending into one. Civilization, he says, is a domesticating thing. It has the ability to tame man, and it must be tweaked and controlled such that it controls the breeding of man. The tamed man is not the elite. The tamed man is the man who will be, in a sense, emasculated and sterilized within, quote, civilization. This civilization of the future will be run by this technocratic elite, whom he calls world controllers, hence the notion of the Fabian socialist world controller that we read about in Brave New World. Mustafa Mond is the perfect kind of character that Galton Darwin's talking about here. He says that eugenics will be the rule of the future, and something like Hugo Drax in the James Bond novel, if you've seen the Roger Moore installment of Moonraker, where you have one guy basically determining who lives and who dies, and that a lot of the future human society will be sterilized, servile classes. And he says this is because in the history of human civilizations, the special classes understood that blood and genetics determines destiny. That's why the elites were those who had royal bloodlines and were not subject to the laws of everyone else. In fact, he even mentions Ptolemaic bloodlines. He mentions gross sex practices, if you catch my drift, and that this is necessary for the elite, and that they will create this sort of master Brahmin class who is also a warrior class that subjugates this small group that's allowed to live. And he says, if you really want to understand the model, it's Plato's Republic. Plato's Republic is the model for this futurist technocratic world state. He says this, as does everyone else in his circles and in this Royal Society clique. He says that this future world state will have total control over who lives and who does not. And it is ultimately, as we said, a kind of Brave New World scenario. It says that pharmaceuticals of the future and the pure science of the future will create this master race, as well as controlling and subjugating the few that are allowed to live in the world state. And he says ultimately this will lead to continental unions that will integrate into a world socialist federalist state. So that's the next million years, according to Charles Galton Darwin. So we can see the logic of where Darwinism takes us. If you enjoyed this 10-minute breakdown, I would say go to my website and subscribe to my talks. I have a longer analysis of this book. You can also get access to the discount codes for chalk.com. I recommend going and getting the Tomcat Ali, proven in peer-reviewed studies to boost testosterone. It's an absolute necessity. If you use the promo code J50, that's JAY50, you get 50% off. You can also get access to my books over at my website, Jay's Analysis. There's a shop where you can get these essays, all of my essays in one book, 660-ish pages. I recommend going and checking that out. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, comment below, and let me know what you think I should cover book-wise that I haven't yet covered.